Okay, let's unpack this. So imagine this for a second. You don't just live to be 120 years old.
Right.
You get there with the energy, the mental clarity, and really the physical health of someone who's 30.
Exactly. The health span, not just the lifespan.
Forever, that was just science fiction. It was this fantasy idea.
It was. But what our sources are pointing to today suggests we've crossed a pretty major threshold. This goal of optimized longevity, of extending that true health span,
Mhm.
it's not being framed as some far-off miracle for the super rich anymore.
No, it's becoming a structural thing,
Yeah.
economic, political even.
It's an imperative.
Hmm.
And it's being driven by these, frankly, radical shifts in U.S. health policy and some amazing breakthroughs in cellular science.
Which is exactly why this deep dive is so important right now. Our whole mission today is to pull together this collection of sources you sent over and to see if they really do outline a viable framework for this, 120-year healthy life.
And we're looking at it as an actionable plan.
Yes, something that's happening now. We're going to dissect the roadmap, the legislative revolution behind it, and the hard biology that really ties it all together.
We're looking at three core pillars that are all connected. First, there's this new developmental model. It's called the Maturogram, or MTG for short. It gives you a kind of psychological map for a very, very long life.
Okay, map.
Then second, we're going to analyze that dramatic January 2026 U.S. dietary guidelines reset.
Yeah.
The policy documents themselves called it a great reset, which tells you everything.
A great reset. That's a strong statement.
It is. And then finally, we'll get into the biological levers, the actual mechanisms like fasting and cellular cleanup that make this kind of sustained health a real possibility.
What I love about this stack of material is how it connects the big picture, the macro, societal stuff. Like, what do you do with a 120-year life with the micro actionable science? What to put on your plate, when to eat, all to keep that cellular repair going. So our focus is really, really tightly on health span.
Okay.
We want to synthesize the practical, evidence-based advice for extending youthful health deep, deep into your life. This isn't about adding, frail years at the end. It's about making the entire lifespan robust.
Purposeful. Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with that idea of looking at our entire lives, maybe up to 120 years, through a completely new developmental lens. If we're going to be healthy for that long, we need a new blueprint for what life is supposed to look like.
And that blueprint is the Maturogram. The MTG, it's a comprehensive graphical model. It's designed specifically to map out human development and maturation across a full 120-year lifespan.
So it's not just an academic theory.
Not at all. It's intended as a practical tool for, policy planning, education, even things like personalized healthcare and career coaching.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate move away from those older linear stage theories that basically just assumed you'd start declining after 65.
The foundational unit they chose is really interesting to me, the lustrum. It sounds ancient. It gives the whole thing a kind of gravitas, even though it's about the future. And that's absolutely the intent. The idea of the lustrum comes from ancient Rome. It was a 5-year period, usually marked by a census and some ceremonies.
5 years.
Exactly. So by using this 5-year segment, the MTG breaks the 120-year lifespan into 24 distinct developmental milestones. They're labeled L1 all the way through L24.
So it's much more granular than just looking at decades.
Much more. It means that instead of these broad, sweeping changes, the model suggests there are measurable psychological, social, and even physical tasks to complete every 5 years. This sort of periodic check-in helps make sure that someone in their later decades isn't just drifting. They're actively engaged.
So it's providing structure, measurable goals for a life that could have, 3 or 4 distinct careers, not just 1 or 2, and then decades of really active, purposeful life after that.
Precisely.
So what new research does the MTG pull in that the older models just completely missed?
It's built on 3 really crucial pillars of modern research. First, it explicitly recognizes how important and how long emerging adulthood has become.
That period in your 20s.
Right. It acknowledges that, in our complex society, people are solidifying their careers and hitting social milestones much later than they did in the mid-20th century. Second, it leans heavily on neuroplasticity research.
Brain science.
Yeah, the new science showing that our brains, especially the parts for executive function and impulse control, keep maturing well into our 3rd decade, sometimes up to age 30. That's way beyond what we used to think. And third, and this is maybe the most important part for our discussion, it integrates modern ideas of successful aging and wisdom. It sees maturation not as something that stops at 65, but as a continuous process across 120 years, where later life is actually defined by acquiring and sharing that wisdom.
That completely reframes what later life even means. It's not an endpoint anymore or some period of decline you just have to get through. It's this huge new cycle of growth and contribution.
It is.
Can you walk us through the high-level structure, these three global maturity stages the model lays out?
Certainly. The Maturagram organizes everything into three big concentric cycles. The first one is the dependent stage. On the chart, it's colored green. This covers the first 15 years of life, which is Lustra 1 through 3.
L1 to L3.
Correct. And this stage is all about the fundamentals: building trust, learning autonomy, basic self-regulation. Then you move to the second cycle, the independent stage. That one's blue, and it covers years 16 through 30, so Lustra 4 through 6.
Okay, so young adulthood.
Exactly. This is the traditional period where you're forming your identity, figuring out your career, starting relationships. It's where all that extended brain neuroplasticity is really put to work. And then finally, you have the most dramatically long cycle of all. It's called the interdependent stage. It's colored purple, and it spans from age 31 all the way to 120.
From 31 to 120.
Yes, Lustra 7 through 24. This single cycle accounts for about 90 years of continuous growth.
90 years. Wow.
And the growth here is defined differently. It's about community service, complex family roles, cultivating wisdom, and mentorship. It's a period defined by giving back, by integrating yourself into the fabric of society.
90 years in that last stage. That's profound. It means later adulthood isn't the third act, it's most of the story.
It is.
So let's focus in on the key Lustra in this later part of the map, especially for people listening who might be approaching or are already in their senior years and are thinking about how to stay vital for the long run.
Absolutely. The MTG really redefines the purpose of those years. Let's start with what the model sees as peak professional maturity. That's Lustrum 9, or L9.
And what age is that?
Ages 41 to 45. The model labels this as expanded responsibility. At this point, people are generally hitting their career peaks, they're taking on big mentorship roles, and they're consciously starting to shift their focus toward legacy and community impact. The sources really stress that at this stage, you're supposed to be actively planning for your role in that long interdependence phase. The focus can't just be on immediate personal gain.
So L9 is about building your legacy while you're still at your peak, knowing you have another 75 years to, enjoy and contribute based on that purpose.
Exactly right. Then if we move a bit closer to the traditional retirement age, we hit Lustrum 12, L12, ages 56 to 60.
Okay.
This is labeled preparation for later years. This is a big pivot point. The focus shifts intensely to retirement planning, which is now incredibly complex, right? You're planning for 60 years, not 20.
Right.
People are also pursuing meaningful activities outside of their career and really intensifying their health management. This is the period where preventative health plans and longevity strategies become a central developmental task. You're getting your body ready for the next 60 years.
So it's all about being proactive, getting your physical house and your financial house in order way before you hit 60. But I imagine the mental state is just as critical for a 120-year journey.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what L14 is all about. Lustrum 14 covers ages 66 to 70, and its main task is defined as emotional balance.
Emotional balance.
The core work here is about fostering stability, deepening your mental well-being, actively cultivating gratitude, and really achieving a sense of acceptance about your life stages.
And how did they suggest people do that?
Well, critically, the MTG framework specifically mentions the increased use of things like mindfulness practices, gratitude journaling, even cognitive behavioral therapy to help people hit this milestone. It recognizes that longevity isn't just biological, it's deeply psychological.
And this focus on emotional health and purpose seems to flow right into what I think is the most exciting part for, say, the American senior audience, the reframing of what comes next.
That would be Lustrum 15, or L15, ages 71 to 75. It's titled Wisdom and Mentorship.
I love that.
The MTG frames this not as a quiet retirement, but as a central purpose-driven job of later adulthood. Individuals in this stage are expected to be cultivating resilience and contentment, specifically by offering their counsel and expertise to younger generations.
Through formal programs?
It can be formal or informal intergenerational programs. The point is they find renewed purpose, not by resting on their laurels, but by leveraging their accomplishments to lead. This provides constant cognitive and social stimulation, which we know from the science is key to maintaining youthful health.
So we're really reframing the 70s as a time of active, purpose-driven leadership. The psychological goals and the biological ones are basically inseparable.
They are. And just to round it out, we look at Lustrum 16, L16, that's ages 76 to 80, and it's mapped as acceptance and resilience.
All right.
Here, the priority shifts a little. It's about adapting gracefully to any health challenges, strengthening those deep personal relationships, passing on family traditions, and just appreciating the journey. The Maturogram gives structure to these tasks over decades rather than cramming them into a short period of decline. What's really fascinating is that this whole map institutionalizes the idea of interdependence. It changes the role of an older adult from, say, a recipient of care to an active, essential resource whose whole purpose is defined by providing wisdom and stability for 90 years. That sense of purpose is a key ingredient for extending health.
Which makes the question of how we actually achieve this healthy 120-year life even more pressing. All that wisdom is wasted if your body breaks down at 75 from chronic disease. And that realization, backed by some truly staggering economic data, seems to have forced a massive shift in U.S. health policy. It targets the most fundamental thing, what we eat.
Yes.
Let's talk about metabolic integrity and this great U.S. dietary reset of 2026.
This was absolutely historic. The joint announcement on January 8th, 2026 from HHS and the USDA. Policy analysts immediately called it a definitive departure from 50 years of nutritional orthodoxy.
And they themselves called it the Great Reset.
They did, often quoting sources directly. It signals the magnitude of the shift.
And it wasn't a subtle shift, was it? It was a complete reversal of decades of guidance that, pushed carbs and demonized natural fats.
A total reversal. The new administration framed it as a necessary course correction, reestablishing whole, unprocessed food as the primary foundation of public health, not, pills and procedures.
It was a revolution based on the new science of metabolic health. So let's break down the core principles of these new guidelines. They really are the nutritional roadmap for that 120-year health span.
Okay. First and foremost, protein.
Right. It went from being an afterthought to being the top priority.
The absolute priority. The revised guidelines explicitly say to prioritize nutrient-dense proteins from both animal and plant sources at every single meal. The suggested target is now significantly higher, 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day.
And why is it so critical, especially for older people?
It's crucial for fighting sarcopenia.
The age-related muscle loss.
Exactly. Sarcopenia is probably the single greatest predictor of immobility and a lower quality of life in your later years. Getting enough protein is what allows you to maintain muscle, which in turn supports your metabolism and keeps you feeling full.
That focus on muscle mass is key. You need it to be able to do all those purposeful things in the later lustra of the Maturogram.
Absolutely. Then we get to the second pillar, which was, and still is, the most controversial part for many.
The fats.
Saturated fats, specifically. The policy explicitly states it is ending the war on saturated fats. The argument from the secretaries was that natural fats were wrongly discouraged for decades, and that this mistake inadvertently caused a catastrophic rise in the consumption of refined carbs and processed seed oils, which then fueled the explosion of metabolic syndrome.
So what specific natural fats are now on the encouraged list in the 2026 reset?
The policy encourages whole food sources that provide essential fatty acids. We're talking about things like full-fat dairy. And the key here is, with no added sugars, butter, traditional animal fats like beef tallow, quality meats, fatty fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, olives, and avocados.
So a return to traditional whole food fats.
Exactly. Viewing them as essential nutrients for your brain and your vascular system, not as poisons.
Okay, and what about carbohydrates? It's not a zero-carb plan for the whole country, I assume?
No, it's a strategy focused on quality. It emphasizes nutrient-dense whole grains, legumes, and starchy vegetables while calling for a sharp reduction in refined carbs.
So white flour, added sugar, the stuff in the middle of the grocery store.
Pretty much. And on hydration, it's simple. Choose water and unsweetened drinks. It also updates alcohol recommendations to be more conservative, aiming for better long-term health.
Now here's the part of this great reset that seems to have the biggest societal impact. The explicit, very strong warning against ultra-processed foods, UPFs.
This was a first. Federal guidelines had never told the public to actively avoid a category of food like this before. The sources are just relentless in linking UPFs to obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and all-cause mortality.
And how do they define them? It's not just junk food, right?
No, it's a very specific definition. They're defined as industrial formulations. things built from commodity extracts, isolates, powders, stabilizers, and artificial additives. They are engineered products, not food. Engineered for shelf life and profit margin, often at the expense of actual nutrition.
And the sources seem to frame this not as a personal failing, not just a lack of willpower.
No, that's the core of the political economy diagnosis, as they call it. The argument is that our overconsumption of UPFs is a structural problem. It's the result of concentrated corporate power that literally redesigned our food environment for profit.
How so?
These industrial products don't just displace real food on shelves, they're engineered to systematically undermine satiety.
Make you keep eating.
Exactly. By hitting what's called the bliss point, the perfect combination of salt, sugar, and fat, they override your body's natural signals that tell you you're full. This leads to constant overconsumption. The metabolic health crisis is, in a way, built into the food supply itself.
It's engineered to make you physically unable to stop. That's a powerful idea.
It is. And this policy change has huge real-world consequences, especially for government food programs like the National School Lunch Program or SNAP.
How does it affect them?
For decades, those programs had to follow guidelines that incentivized low-fat, highly processed, high-sugar options. Under the 2026 guidelines, all federal food contracts must prioritize nutrient-dense, lightly processed proteins and fats. It aligns the entire system with the new science.
So what's the ultimate goal here? It's bigger than just changing school lunches.
The ultimate goal is systemic disease prevention. It's a shift from just treating illness to actively maintaining metabolic integrity.
And it targets what the sources call the metabolic cortex.
Yes. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and Alzheimer's, the four horsemen of modern chronic disease. By focusing on eliminating the insulin resistance that fuels these conditions, the government expects them to become increasingly rare over time.
Which is how you lay the biological groundwork for a 120-year health span.
That's the plan.
We should probably touch on the more extreme end of this low-carb philosophy. The sources mention the rising popularity of things like the carnivore diet. What's the consensus there for someone aiming for radical longevity?
It's a measured critique. The sources acknowledge the immediate benefits, but also highlight some pretty significant long-term risks.
So what are the benefits?
Proponents of the carnivore diet eating only meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. They report things like rapid weight loss and a huge drop in inflammation. And that makes sense, because when you eliminate all carbs, your insulin sensitivity improves and your body's forced to burn fat.
So there are real short-term metabolic gains, especially for someone who was very insulin resistant before?
Yes, the sources confirm that. But, and this is a big but, there are major scientific concerns about long-term adherence and nutritional gaps. Gaps that directly conflict with the goal of being robustly healthy for 120 years.
What kind of gaps?
A crucial finding is that while the diet is rich in things like B12 and iron, it's critically lacking in others, specifically vitamin C, vitamin E, calcium, and magnesium.
And those are all vital for later life, for resilience in your 70s and 80s.
Exactly. Without them, your bone health is at risk because of the calcium and magnesium deficiencies. Your immune function is compromised without vitamin C and E. And on top of that, large-scale studies consistently show a strong link between high red meat consumption and a higher risk of cardiovascular disease.
So the consensus is caution.
Caution. It might offer a short-term fix, but for a 120-year timeline, it would require very careful medical supervision and probably a lot of supplementation to avoid major deficiencies.
So the 2026 dietary reset is really positioned as the sweet spot, a balanced whole foods approach that embraces protein and fat but avoids the extremes. It gives you the nutritional foundation.
Yes.
So let's pivot from the what to the how. Let's get into the core biological mechanics, moving beyond just food choices to the timing of our eating and this idea of cellular self-renewal.
Right. If the new dietary guidelines are the clean fuel for the engine, then autophagy is the essential deep cleaning maintenance crew. It is absolutely fundamental to longevity. It's the key to achieving that sustained youthful health.
Okay, so break down autophagy for us. I know it's a Nobel Prize-winning process, but what is it in simple terms?
Autophagy literally means self-eating. It's the cell's natural regulated waste management system.
Self-eating, okay.
It's the process where the cell finds, isolates, and breaks down damaged, dysfunctional, or just old parts. Think of misfolded proteins, which are a hallmark of diseases like Alzheimer's or worn-out mitochondria, which drives cellular aging.
So it recycles the old parts.
It breaks them down into their basic building blocks, amino acids, lipids, and then recycles those raw materials to build fresh new components. It is systemic self-renewal at the most basic level.
And when that self-renewal process slows down, that's when aging really kicks in and diseases can take hold.
Precisely. A huge and growing body of evidence shows that this process, what scientists call autophagic flux, slows down dramatically as we age. And that slowdown is directly linked to chronic diseases, especially cardiovascular disease. If we don't actively stimulate the process, our internal repair shop slowly goes out of business.
So how do we stimulate it? The sources are very clear that the most powerful trigger is something available to everyone.
Nutrient deprivation. Or you could call it energy stress. It's consistently the most robust and accessible way to induce autophagy in our cells.
And this covers a few different approaches.
Yes, it includes things like intermittent fasting, or IF, maybe a 16-hour daily fast. It includes periodic short-term fasting, like doing a 3 to 5 day fast once a month, or even the more intense one meal a day protocol, OMAD.
The sources mention that for people who are really fat adapted following the new guidelines, OMAD can activate these deep repair mechanisms every single day.
It can, especially when you get to a point where, because your blood sugar is so stable, physical hunger just isn't really a factor anymore. That metabolic flexibility is a huge advantage for long-term adherence.
And we finally have solid human evidence for this, right? It's not just mice in a lab anymore.
We do. A really groundbreaking human trial came out in late 2025. It used a 5-day fasting mimicking diet, or FMD, which is a type of periodic fast. And it showed that this protocol significantly increased autophagic flux in the human participants.
And what were the measurable health outcomes from that increased cellular cleanup?
They were profound. The increased autophagy was directly correlated with 2 huge longevity markers. First, much better insulin sensitivity, which lowers your risk for diabetes and heart disease.
Okay.
And second, and this is the really exciting part, a measurable reduction in biological age scores.
So the intervention was literally turning back the clock at a cellular level.
That's what the data suggests. It confirms that these strategies aren't just about weight loss. They're about molecular anti-aging.
Can you get into the weeds a little bit on the cellular signaling? What's happening inside our cells when we switch into that fasted state?
This is the critical metabolic switch. When you deprive the cell of nutrients, 2 big opposing things happen. First, you get a powerful downregulation of a pathway called mTORC1. You can think of mTORC1 as the cell's growth accelerator pedal.
Go, go, go.
Exactly. It senses nutrients and tells the cell, resources are here, let's grow and build. Fasting takes the foot off that pedal. It pauses growth and redirects energy toward repair. That pause is essential. At the same time, you get a strong activation of another pathway called AMPK. APK is like the cell's energy efficiency manager.
Okay.
Its activation cranks up fat burning and signals the cell to get really efficient and start cleaning house. It specifically promotes things like lipophagy, the recycling of stored fats, which is great for things like preventing fatty liver disease.
So it sounds like a perfect biological blueprint for just sustained youthful maintenance. It directly slows down biological aging, which supports that whole maturogram idea of being vital well into your later years.
It is the biological engine that drives the whole framework.
Yeah.
And this cellular integrity connects right back to what the 2026 dietary guidelines are trying to do: fight chronic inflammation.
Right, which is the silent driver of so many cardiovascular disease risk factors.
The primary driver.
So let's quantify that. How effective are these anti-inflammatory diets, really?
A major meta-analysis looked at all the randomized controlled trials on anti-inflammatory diets, so Mediterranean, DAS, Nordic, those kinds of patterns. The findings were clear and consistent across thousands of people.
And what specific markers improved?
Adherence to these diets led to significantly lower levels of multiple key risk factors. They saw measurable drops in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure.
Okay, less strain on the system.
Right. They saw much better lipid profiles, specifically lower LDL-C, the bad cholesterol, and lower total cholesterol. And importantly, they saw a reduction in the main marker for systemic inflammation, HS-CCRP.
Lower blood pressure, better cholesterol, less inflammation. That's a powerful combination.
It absolutely confirms that the policy shift toward whole foods and away from pro-inflammatory processed stuff is grounded in solid clinical evidence. Metabolic integrity, achieved through diet and fasting, is the cornerstone.
So let's connect all this to cognitive longevity. Because for anyone planning to live to 120, Losing your mind to Alzheimer's is probably the number one fear.
It is.
What did the 2025 Alzheimer's conference tell us about prevention?
It provided some extremely compelling evidence for structured lifestyle changes. The landmark study was the U.S. Pointer trial. It was a huge multi-site trial with over 2,000 older adults aged 60 to 79 who were already considered at high risk for cognitive decline.
And what did the intervention involve?
It was a multi-pronged approach. It combined regular physical exercise, adherence to the MIND diet, which is a kind of hybrid of Mediterranean and Dash Age, focused on brain-healthy foods.
Leafy greens, berries, that sort of thing.
Exactly. It also included cognitive training exercises and really diligent health monitoring. The results were amazing. They saw statistically significant, measurable gains in global cognition for the group that did the intervention.
And this worked across the board.
Yes, the gains were consistent across different demographic and genetic groups. It's a huge confirmation that lifestyle has enormous power to protect the brain, even in people who are already at risk.
That's a huge win for personal agency. Did the conference also show any links between vascular health treatments and brain health?
It did. There's a growing focus on vascular targets for preventing Alzheimer's. The idea is simple. What's bad for your heart's blood vessels is bad for your brains.
Makes sense.
A key finding came from a trial of a drug called obicetrapib. It's a CETP inhibitor typically used to improve cholesterol and cardiovascular outcomes. They found that in these heart patients, the drug also reduced plasma biomarkers associated with Alzheimer's pathology, specifically p-tau181 and NFL.
That is a smoking gun. It's basically saying if you keep your arteries clean, which is the whole point of the 2026 dietary reset, you are simultaneously protecting your brain from Alzheimer's.
That's the takeaway. Vascular health is neurological health. The whole package diet, cellular repair through fasting and lifestyle, provides this multi-layered defense for your brain, making sure that when you get to lustrum 15, you have wisdom to offer, not just faded memories.
The story so far is all about what we as individuals can do. Diet, fasting, purpose.
No.
But if this is really a societal shift driven by policy, the economic side of it must be just staggering. It must be forcing a total rethink of global finance.
The economic argument is overwhelming. When economists model the impact of extending not just lifespan, but health span,
Right, delaying that expensive sick period at the end of life.
which is called compressing morbidity, the economic gains are unprecedented.
How big are we talking? Give us the numbers from the sources because they are just shocking.
They are calculated in the trillions. The economic models show that a slowdown in aging that increases life expectancy by just one single year is worth $38 trillion to the global economy.
38 trillion for 1 year.
And if we can increase healthy life expectancy by 10 years, the projected gain explodes to $367 trillion.
That's an almost unimaginable number.
It is. The economic value of targeting aging itself as the root cause is potentially larger than completely eradicating both cancer and heart disease combined.
And this is happening at a time when healthcare costs are already spiraling out of control.
Exactly. We are in a really challenging cost environment. Global health insurance costs were projected to jump by more than 10% in 2026. That's a 10.9% average globally, 9% in the U.S. It's putting massive strain on every system.
And what are the main drivers of those rising costs? Do they line up with the diseases the dietary reset is targeting?
They line up perfectly. The sources identify the top global cost drivers in private health plans, and they are the exact chronic diseases we've been talking about.
Which are?
Number 1, cardiovascular and vascular disorders. Number 2, cancer. 3, musculoskeletal disorders. And 4, endocrine and metabolic disorders, which is where you find obesity and diabetes.
So the top 4 cost drivers are all fueled by metabolic dysfunction and inflammation, the very things the 2026 reset is designed to fix.
Precisely. The argument is self-reinforcing. If the new policy works, you systematically attack the biggest costs in global healthcare. And that's how that $367 trillion figure starts to make sense. It's the projected cost of not solving this problem.
And this all has huge social implications. You look at things like Social Security, which were designed for a much shorter lifespan.
They were designed when life expectancy was around 65. The systems are already under immense strain, and it's made worse by the rising old age dependency ratio.
Remind us of that demographic shift.
It's staggering. In 1945, you had about 40 active workers paying into the system for every one person drawing benefits.
40 to 1.
By 2030, the projection is that each retiree will be supported by the contributions of just over 2 workers. 2 to 1. It's an unavoidable financial challenge. A longer, healthy lifespan is really the only way to stabilize these systems.
So the biological breakthrough that allows for a 120-year life isn't just about individual health. It forces a massive social and economic reconstruction. The maturogram's long interdependence stage is basically the social blueprint for this new reality.
It's the model for the new economy. The
Mhm.
whole idea of a single clean break into retirement at 65 is obsolete. That 90-year interdependence stage means people might have 3 or 4 more distinct careers. The value is prolonging the period of contribution.
And the sources mention changes to family structures, too.
Yes, the models project that you might be, hiking with your great-grandchildren when you're 120 and still fully independent.
Mm.
This need to stay engaged both socially and financially aligns perfectly with society's need for that continued wisdom and productivity.
I think we have to ask the most critical question that comes with any breakthrough this big, the equity question.
Hmm.
If this longevity science works, are we just making the gap between the haves and the have-nots even bigger? Creating a world where the rich can afford to live longer and the poor can't?
That is the critical concern, and it's raised frequently by ethicists, that the wealthy will get disproportionate access to life itself, widening all the existing health disparities.
But there's a counter-argument.
There is. The argument is that aging biology research, specifically things like autophagy and metabolic health, is inherently egalitarian
How so?
because aging and metabolic disease affect all humans, rich and poor. Unlocking the universal secrets of why our bodies decline is basic research that has the potential for really low-cost, high-impact applications for everyone. For instance, the main interventions we've talked about, fasting, cutting out processed foods, eating more protein, these are fundamentally behavioral and policy-driven things, not expensive exclusive drugs. If these low-cost policies and accessible protocols become the standard of care, the benefits of radical longevity could be spread very widely and very quickly. The goal is to make the 120-year health span the norm, not a luxury commodity.
We've really covered the three inseparable pillars of this entire shift: the new map for life, the nutrition policy revolution, and the biological self-renewal system. It really is a complete package for achieving radical health span.
To sum it all up, the paradigm shift is giving us a structured plan, the Maturogram, which defines purpose across 120 years. It's giving us a clear, evidence-based nutritional roadmap in the 2026 dietary reset. And finally, it gives us a powerful, universally accessible biological tool fasting-induced autophagy to stimulate cellular repair and actually achieve that healthy longevity.
This is where the implications just feel staggering. We are seeing the start of an era where health policy, driven by science and huge economic pressure, is actively trying to turn back the clock on chronic disease, not just treat the symptoms. By focusing on metabolic integrity and cellular repair, this promise of having the health of a 30-year-old at 120, it seems more and more grounded in reality. And that challenges every social and economic structure we have, especially how we define and value the mature American population.
And it raises these huge questions about purpose, doesn't it? Especially in that massive 90-year interdependence stage. We've established that slowing down aging is worth trillions of dollars, which justifies the policy shift. But here's the final thought. If achieving 120 years of youthful health becomes common, and people in their 70s are still leading and mentoring, just like the Maturogram suggests, what new developmental milestones, what new lustra beyond the current 24 will humanity need to invent to give deeper, sustained meaning and purpose to the next 100 years of an interdependent, healthy, multi-stage life? Something for you to mull or explore on your own.